Really, that's what's happening here in front of this detention center in Grayson, Kentucky. It is continuing, but we are watching and waiting to hear one more time from Kim Davis, the Rowan County clerk, who spoke. Really, actually, it was her attorney who spoke for her, saying she will return to work later this week. She will continue to follow her conscience. That is the question, really, though. What does that mean? How will that look as far as same-sex marriage licenses are concerned in that county in Kentucky? So we're watching and waiting to hear one more time from Kim Davis. But let's turn and talk politics, because really this has become politicized. I have Republican strategist Lisa Booth and our own chief political correspondent Dana Bash standing by. And I think really first, here's my first observation. When you look at this landscape in Grayson, Kentucky, you have Governor Huckabee, who along with his wife Janet, they went inside. He tweeted a photo having met with Kim Davis and the wife during the scrum. Afterwards, he's standing right next to her. He is in the thick of this. And then you have Senator Ted Cruz, who is there as well, but a tad off to the side. I guess I'm just wondering. Obviously, both men are vying for space on this story, but what do you make of the fact that Governor Huckabee, he's right in the middle of it?
He could not be more right in the middle of it. I made the same observation that you did. It's all about imagery in situations like this for a politician, and the fact that Huckabee was right over her shoulder was very telling. Now, to be fair to Mike Huckabee, as Alice Stewart was on with you last hour, he has been very involved with her and her case pretty much since day one, helping to arrange this rally that you've been playing during your entire show. But look, this really does speak to such a huge issue within the Republican presidential voting electorate, which is kind of the divide between do we do what it takes for religious liberty and religious freedom, even and especially when we believe the law of the land, which many people believe is the case because the Supreme Court said something different, or do we follow the law? You have the Mike Huckabees of the world, as you mentioned, to a lesser extent, Ted Cruz on one side, standing very firmly with her, saying she needs to do whatever she needs to do, despite her job, despite what the law is. And then others like John Kasich, for example, the governor from Ohio, even Carly Fiorina saying, you know what? It's too bad that she disagrees with the law. We might not agree with it, but she's got to follow it. So it really does speak to a divide that in the field and perhaps within the Republican voting population.
Yeah. I mean, Lisa, Dana just teed up my second point, my question to you. I mean, this is one of those questions I imagine that may be now in the thick of things, in the fold for Jake Tapper come next Wednesday night at the Reagan Library when we have all these candidates standing up on that stage as part of our, debate coverage. I mean, this is one of those questions that now these Republican candidates are having to answer for. Interestingly, Donald Trump has been quieter than normal on this very issue. What do you make of all of this?
Well, look, I think this is an important debate to have. I mean, religious freedom in the country is something that is important and something that should absolutely be discussed. But I would argue that this is less of a political and partisan issue and more of an issue of religious freedom. And if you look, Kim Davis herself is a Democrat. So I don't think that this is a partisan issue. I think at heart this is an issue of religious liberty. And I think we're going to continue to see this discussion in the country. If you remember, the Obama administration had said in oral arguments before the Supreme Court's decision that religious institutions and schools' tax-exempt status could be put into question after the Supreme Court's decision. So I think we're going to continue seeing this conversation about trying to find a balance between the Supreme Court's decision and also protecting religious freedom under the First Amendment.
I hear you, and I agree that a lot of this is a religious issue, a religious freedom issue. But Dana Bash, and this is something I asked of Alice Stewart last hour, and she vehemently said, of course, Governor Huckabee would be here in Grayson, Kentucky, even if, he weren't running for president. I don't know if, the Ted Cruz folks would say the same about their candidate. But, I mean, we can't ignore the fact that politics are at play.
Well, I mean, I think sorry, Dana.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Dana.
Of course, it's politically advantageous for Mike Huckabee to be here. He might be there if he weren't running for president, and same goes for Ted Cruz. But I would say, Kim might agree with me, like this is the first kind of big test of the Supreme Court decision and the idea of standing up for religious liberty, which is really a catchphrase that you hear all the time in conservative circles. But there might be others. What happens when somebody who has a bakery, does it, or a religious organization doesn't want to help somebody who, based on the fact that they are getting married and they are of the same sex? There are a whole bunch of other issues likely coming down the pike. This is the first, and this is obviously the most interesting so far, since she is somebody who is a government worker, a state government worker, so it's kind of an extreme